Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, July 23rd, 2021. Time for another show. Time for another Olympiad, as it turns out. This is what's happening. I guess, is it happening this morning? Is that because of the way the timing works out as between here and Japan, that the opening ceremonies appeared to be on this morning? I wasn't paying a great deal of attention to what was going on in the Olympics this morning. I was only vaguely aware. I was pretty sure they were starting soon, and I know they have some events these days before the opening ceremonies. I usually look forward to the opening ceremonies and enjoy them a great deal. Not watching this time. Of course, one thing that's happening is it's happening in the middle of, or the beginning of the workday, and I can't pay attention to it. But it's also like a little depressing, certainly watching people tweet about a processional that's about half full into an empty stadium and everybody's wearing masks, and really a good reminder that the Olympic Games probably shouldn't be taking place at this point. I think I saw the other day that there was something in the order of 90 or so, just under 100 confirmed COVID cases among athletes and people immediately adjacent to athletes, directly connected at least with the operation of the Olympic Games just the other day. So that isn't so good. This morning I see the news that the head team doctor for the Olympic team says that something in the neighborhood of 100 American athletes are unvaccinated, which isn't actually all that surprising in that, when I think about how crazy some of the training regimens are for some of these athletes and how, let's say, how experimental many of them are about their health and their routine, I can imagine that they wouldn't want to, they would be the sort of people who would have all sorts of concerns about anything outside of the ordinary getting introduced in their body as they were training for the Olympics. And I could also see, even if you weren't particularly vaccine averse or into alternative medicine even, I could imagine, although I'd work it out in my schedule at some point, that if I were in such an intensive training program leading up to the Olympic Games, I don't know how I would have scheduled a vaccine for me that could, knock you out of training, even for a day or two, just if you have one of the more mild or even one of the more serious reactions to the vaccine. It was very common for people to have those flu-like symptoms a day or two into the vaccination routine. And if you are, if your routine calls for you, biking 1,000 miles and lifting 10,000 pounds every single day on a boiled cube of tofu, well, I wouldn't want to disrupt that either. But on the other hand, I'd also say I wouldn't want it all to go to waste by either getting COVID before the games or showing up at the games and having my performance there ruined by COVID. I'd have been looking, I think, for a way to fit that into my schedule. But then again, here I am, and there they are. So you tell me who had the better plan. I guess if the end result is getting to Tokyo and competing, or at least being nearby when you're supposed to compete, I'm not even that. All right. So anyway, that's going on this morning. And I don't know. I guess people expressing their surprise and or delight at the single athlete from Tonga marching in as usual. I think he comes in usually shirtless and oiled. And I don't know. Now, some people are still surprised by that. Others are just, you're reminded each time we have one of these games how delightful it is when the Tongans march in. So I always enjoy the ceremony. This year, I think I probably would have found it a little bit depressing. I'm a little worried about those athletes being there at all. So, okay. Moving on, though, Bill in Portland, Maine is up and about this morning. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. I am reliably informed. Is today, he asks, the day Republicans have their 6-month epiphany? That's a good question. I know. I'm the guy in the tweet here, KagroX, you see. And if we all eat our vegetables, he might tell us. And we'll see. What kind of vegetables have you got on your plate? Raw, cooked, whole, diced, in a stew? What's going on here? Some vegetables, I think, more entertaining to watch people eat than others. But we'll leave that for later on, the evening hours of the program, if you will. Okay. Yeah, the 6-month epiphany. This morning I did see, let's see, I'll have to scroll back and find that one. Who was talking about that? Just reminding us that during the campaign, this is just one of those things that candidates say, I don't think I'm going to hold Joe Biden to it in any way. I mean, there's nothing to get out of holding him to it. It's not, he hasn't made me a bet or anything. But let's see, somewhere, here we go. Amanda Turkle. Okay, Amanda was reminding everybody today in HuffPost that Biden predicted a GOP epiphany post-Trump and said it might take 6 to 8 months for them to come to their senses. She's reminding us that it is now 6 months and so far no epiphany. He's got another 2 months to go on that prediction, I guess. And let's see. I guess it's a good reminder. I'm going to take a look at the article that she attaches. I imagine it's a longer read of the point she made fairly effectively in the tweet there. And that it probably quotes Biden as saying that there would be such a change. And it might even have been not a terrible guess, especially, in the middle of a campaign, to say, 6 to 8 months after we beat the pants off of this guy, some people will come around. And some people have come around. I did see yesterday that Bob Dole, not exactly a thought leader for the Republicans these days, but, he's still got a name. Bob Dole has come around to that, and he wanted everybody to know that he wasn't one of those never Trumpers or anything. He did say, I was anyway, a Trumper, but I've kind of burnt out on the Trump thing now. He's, just what you were looking for. Somebody who was willing to say, yeah, actually, I guess I could, as a Republican, stand behind Donald Trump here, and I will, and did, and I imagine he probably voted for him the second time, but he's basically has said, I've had enough of him lying about having won the election. He didn't win the election, he lost it fair and square. And it disturbs me a great deal to watch him run around the country and convince other people that something nefarious went on. There was no evidence of fraud anywhere. The election went off fine, and there's just no reason in the world to think that there was any kind of fraud that changed the outcome. And it's upsetting to watch him lie about this. And yeah, that's great. Like I said, I don't know how many people he's taken with him, but it was nice to see. So there's one epiphany. Does that count? Does it get Biden off the hook? I'm not really sure. I will say, as I'm reviewing Amanda's opening paragraphs here in the article, I guess it's worth not only calling to people's attention, but perhaps calling out Joe Biden a little bit, just given the way he expressed it during the campaign. The opening paragraphs here. Central to Joe Biden's presidential candidacy was an optimism that Republicans could and would change when Donald Trump was no longer president. With Donald Trump out of the way, you're going to see a number of my Republican colleagues have an epiphany. Mark my words. Mark my words. If it wasn't for the mark my words said twice, I wouldn't have marked them. And I didn't mark them, actually. I guess Amanda wouldn't have marked them, and then she wouldn't have brought them back to our attention, and we wouldn't be here now saying, gosh, that looks fairly silly in hindsight, to say the very least. Biden continued to hold on to this belief, and he touted his record of reaching across the aisle. A month before he took office as president, Biden again predicted you're going to see an awful lot of change in the Republican Party with Trump out of the White House, acknowledging it could, however, take 6 to 8 months before he had a strong working relationship with the GOP. I will say, like I said, there's 2 more months before he runs out of time on this one, but I think the strength of his working relationship with the GOP is actually weakening, or certainly appears to be. I mean, the big success was running roughshod over them, of course, and passing the American Rescue Plan. But, you know, I don't see any evidence of working with them on anything. I guess infrastructure, if that deal ever comes through, that could be something. And I guess if that makes it through the bipartisan version of it and makes it through in regular order, even if it's actually had the best stuff siphoned off from it and put in the reconciliation bill, just the fact that they would get it through, I guess, would be evidence, certainly, that the relationship hasn't weakened, after all. Maybe that it's growing stronger. And I guess the 2-month time frame is about what it might take to get the thing knocked out. So maybe he makes it before the 8-month deadline. But it doesn't matter because, like I said, there's nothing in the offing here. There's no bet on the line. And that's not something we typically hold our politicians to. It actually reminds me of something I saw just, when was it? Was it early yesterday, late yesterday? I think, was it yesterday at all? I happened to see somebody calling Ted Cruz to account on something that was very similar. And then again, I had heard and forgotten about, because it's just one of those things that candidates on the campaign trail say, and, you know, there's no holding to them to it, and they don't mean it, and I don't know, we're supposed to take it in the moment. Yeah, here we go. Ted Cruz, called to account this time by the Twitter account Bad COVID-19 Takes, and it was from yesterday, and said 1 year ago today, so we were talking about July 22nd, 2020, Ted Cruz gave his guarantee. What guarantee was that? It's a short little video clip, so maybe let me put it in pocket here and open it up on the show computer so you can all hear it in all of its glory. I mean, you know, the kind of dumb things Ted Cruz will say and do. But this was, I thought, particularly disturbing, given if you're going to call Biden to account for his comment, then we really got to take this one seriously, too. Let's see. What do I have to do to engineer getting some sound on this thing? Here we go.
In November. I hope he doesn't.
All right, we got to back it up and raise the volume, and let's see. Here we go.
If it ends up that Biden wins in November, I hope he doesn't. I don't think he will, but if he does, I guarantee you the week after the election, suddenly all those Democratic governors, all those Democratic mayors will say, everything's magically better. Go back to work, go back to school. Suddenly the problems are solved. You won't even have to wait for Biden to be sworn in. All they'll need is Election Day, and suddenly their willingness to just destroy people's lives and livelihoods, they will have accomplished their task. That's wrong. It's cynical, and we shouldn't be a part of it.
Did you get that? I mean, was the sound good enough on that? It was a little low, I thought. But I think it probably came through. It was really remarkable, and just the stridency of the comments. So what was the deal? If for some reason it didn't come through properly, he says, if it ends up that Biden wins in November, I hope he doesn't, but I don't think he will. But if he does, I guarantee you the week after the election, suddenly all those Democratic governors, all those Democratic mayors will say, and we're talking here about them saying it about response to the coronavirus and the measures taken, lockdowns, masking, vaccines, etc. They will all say, he says, everything's magically better. Go back to work, go back to school. Suddenly the problems are solved. You won't even have to wait for Biden to be sworn in, he stresses. All they'll need is Election Day. And suddenly their willingness to just destroy people's lives and livelihoods. Now this is really interesting, right? This is what their willingness is. not to take the virus seriously, to prevent it from spreading, to take even more aggressive measures perhaps than might even be medically indicated, just to make sure that people stay safe and don't die unnecessarily and make others sick unnecessarily. That's what he thinks they're looking for, that they will have accomplished their task of destroying people's lives. Now, this is interesting, right at the end where he says, well, that's wrong. Well, obviously it would be, but he says, it's cynical and we shouldn't be a part of it. And I mean, that was really the closer for me. Like, would you agree that it was cynical to make this kind of a guarantee and then walk away from it, right? And to never be held to account for it. It's not like he's been ducking it. He hasn't been walking around saying, don't hold me to account for what I said on July 22nd, 2020. I mean, it was just another offhand comment for him. But speaking of being cynical, right? To get up there, and after all, I guess I should roll this out. It's cynical and we shouldn't be a part of it, etc. But that combined with I guarantee you, if Biden wins, you won't even have to wait till Election Day. This will happen. And it's so cynical that it happened. And I don't know. That one really ground my gears, I guess. I don't use that phrase a whole lot, but that really did piss me off. The idea that he would, stand there and say, I guarantee you, I'm actually going to give that word. Like, does the word mean anything? I know it gets used rhetorically all the time. But can I collect on this guarantee? What do I get out of this? I mean, you guaranteed me that this would all go away magically. And I mean, I have to imagine that would be over by now. Magic, right? We wouldn't even have to wait for Election Day. And it would all go away. Not only would the COVID hoax go away, but all precautions from Democrats would go away. And they would no longer care about saving lives or keeping people from getting sick. Now, I was guaranteed, sir. What do I get? Clearly, there must be something here, some sort of recompense. You would resign. You would reimburse me for my trouble in some way. Nothing? Well, what does it mean to get a Ted Cruz guarantee? I mean, I know it was just campaign rhetoric, but I almost feel like reporters should be, holding him to account on this and finding him and playing the tape and saying, when you said you guaranteed it, what does that mean? What exactly does the Ted Cruz guarantee entail? What is it that you're trying to make us certain of by telling us that you guarantee it? Because it hasn't come to pass, nor have you changed your behavior in the least. So I'm just wondering, for instance, earlier today you told us that you guaranteed that something, blah, blah, blah would happen. And I remind you that the last guarantee you gave was not only worthless, but has been proven objectively wrong. You've missed the mark by 100% here, sir. What good is your guarantee? I just wonder what Mr. Debating Society would have to say about something like that. It wouldn't change anything, and well, everybody knows that. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't know. I just thought that one really bothered me, so I thought I would share it with you. I would really bother you with it. And have I succeeded in doing anything like that? All right. Well, I hope you can get over it. Let's see. Much more to go over here today. I think we got the sense of what was going on with the Joe Biden thing. He's continued to hold on to this belief. He hopes he can pass the bipartisan infrastructure package. We don't know if it's really going to happen. And something, and Donald Trump and his supporters haven't changed a bit. Oh, that did remind me. I wonder if I can find it just by scrolling a little bit more. I'm pretty sure this one's not too far back either, but it'll probably take me some time to find it. But a good point being made about, well, Trump in general. And when I find the tweet, I'll share it with you because it was very specific, and I also would like to give credit for it. But the gist here was that we're all still suffering in this country under, here we are, Eric Bollert's tweet from Wednesday, which he sent out with the note, his latest press run newsletter, about which he describes it being sexism is a hell of a drug, which wouldn't necessarily reveal the content to you right away, but he gets to the point pretty quickly. Let me bring up his tweet here. The piece is illustrated here with side-by-side pictures from the 2016 presidential debates as between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and asking the question, why doesn't the press tell Trump to go away the way they did with Hillary? Although here it says listen now, so maybe it's his press run his podcast rather than his newsletter. But do you remember all of this? It's all illustrated pretty clearly here as well. And I think it was also comments on his tweet. Oh, yeah, right down here. One of his tweet threads illustrates the point very clearly. But he's quoting, I guess, from his newsletter, podcast. I don't know. I didn't check. The premise to virtually all the coverage today is, of course, that Trump will run again. By contrast, the first woman White House nominee was treated quite differently after her defeat, as journalists angrily and irrationally, he says, demanded she go away. Do you remember? You must remember this the way I do, too. Post-2016 election, while everyone was reeling from being told that, yeah, we were awarding the presidency to Donald Trump despite the fact that he had lost the popular vote in overwhelming fashion and had pulled off, some sort of miracle inside straight with the Electoral College. And we were all reeling in shock, and people were asking, the journalists were asking Hillary Clinton questions. What do you think? What's going on? What do you make of all this? And she was answering, and then people were like, well, why doesn't she go away? She lost. And for a while, commenting on, I guess, depending on how you viewed it, could have been, oh, told you so. Everything is getting effed up, and Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing and was never prepared to assume the presidency in the first place. I told you that was going to happen. I told you he'd kill us all, and he very nearly has. And the reaction from the press was, look, you lost, you need to go away. Right? And here she wasn't really even doing anything, right? As I recall, she was walking through the woods, and reporters were chasing her through the woods to ask for her comments about these things. And, and then writing, why won't she go away? But in case you don't remember what it was like, Eric then includes a list of the headlines from the post-election period. In case you forgot how insane the post-election coverage was, he's got this collection of headlines for national journals. Headline, Hillary Clinton just won't go away. The Washington Examiner's, why won't Hillary Clinton just go away? The Toronto Star, writing, it's time for Hillary Clinton to go away forever. Vanity Fair, running the headline, can Hillary Clinton please go quietly into the night? Politico, how do you solve a problem like Hillary? And the LA Times with, Hillary, I love you, but please go away. I mean, it seems like a pretty clear theme here. And it was more than just, well, you lost the election, shut up. It was, get out of politics forever. It was, this election defeat should be a clear indication to you that the Clintons, as a family, their time is past in politics. Go away. Don't try. Not only don't weigh in on politics now, don't comment on the previous election since you just lost it, but don't ever let us see you around here running again. There was no space in the media given to the possibility that you would run again in 2020. And by contrast, not only is there no, why won't Donald Trump just go away? And then the answer is, well, he'll never accept the advice of going away, but not only accepting that he's around, but working with the understanding that he would run again and that he should in some way. I don't know. They seem to endorse the idea that he would run again anyway in 2024. I thought that was pretty remarkable. And I don't recall anybody ever running. I don't know, maybe somewhere there's one, but it certainly wasn't as much of a trend of, Donald Trump should just go away. We should never hear from Donald Trump again. We certainly shouldn't be hearing from Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump or Lara Trump or who isn't even a Trump or Ivanka Trump. And that's a good point, I must say. Yes, well made and well taken there. So, okay. I think that's all I had for like scrolling back through the timeline. Let's see. Coming up on our first break, we haven't even gotten to what is surely the biggest outrage of the day, but we'll save it for afterwards. It's Brett Kavanaugh, in case you were wondering whether we were going to get to that one. We will. We should. I'll have, I guess we'll say, at least 2 pieces here to share with you on that front. Maybe more. And this possible fun piece, too, from Business Insider. I don't know whether we should trust it or what size grain of salt we take it with, but Michael Cohen, you remember him, saying, and being cited in the headline here from Business Insider, Michael Cohen says he thinks Jared Kushner has already flipped on Trump. Wouldn't that be fantastic? And I don't know how I want that situation to work out. I was thinking yesterday of the baseball bat scene from The Untouchables and thinking, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. I don't know if I would want Donald Trump to have the satisfaction of bashing Jared Kushner's head in with a baseball bat in front of everybody else for failing to remain a team player and instead being out for himself. But on the other hand, wow, Jared Kushner getting his head knocked in with a baseball bat, that really would be something. I'd have to buy a ticket for that. So, I don't know. Can't figure out exactly what the lesser of 2 evils is on that one. But I'm willing to experiment with it. And if we wanted to give this a try and put the players in position, I don't know if I have any accurate guesses about how I feel when this whole thing goes down, but I'd love to find out, and I'll take a guess, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's all I can say about that. All right, well, we've got that and much more coming up. It is a Friday, so we should have an odd sampling of stories to get through at this point. We'll take a quick break, and breakfast can be fixed in the background, right? So everyone who's familiar with all the daytime sounds of the KITM program gets their fix. It'd be weird if anybody was really into that, but you never know. Be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Where do we begin? I think the long story of the day has to be the Kavanaugh thing, and maybe that's the best thing to do coming right out of the commercial break. The various pieces I have to choose from here. Oh, you know what? I should open up. I just did see this morning that, if I'm not mistaken, Joan had a piece on it this morning, or maybe it was from yesterday. And no, it's early this morning. Why don't we, I don't know whether to start there and get the overall picture of things or like dive into the details of the New York Times. Let's start with Joan, because why not? It's always fun when Joan's on the show, and we can pretend she's on the show here. I don't think I can do a Joan voice. I've never tried to imitate Joan. I don't think I could do that. I don't know. I think I'd better not do that. I can tell you that much. And probably not a wise idea, no matter how well I do it. Anyway, the FBI apparently lied about investigating Kavanaugh. What are Democrats going to do about it? And now I don't even feel like telling the story anymore because she's gotten to the heart of the matter in both sentences in this headline. And it's like, I don't know, it's depressing. Yes, the FBI, I wish I had a clearer idea of what I was saying when we were discussing Kavanaugh at the time. I feel fairly certain that and I didn't come up with the idea. It wasn't my hunch or anything. I think it was probably someone else's. And I said, that makes a great deal of sense. But I feel like if we went back and researched what we were all saying about the Kavanaugh investigation at the time, I feel like somebody had their finger on it even then, that this is a fake investigation. I mean, I know we felt that way afterwards when they came up with nothing. I think it was pretty clear that they hadn't really done any investigating. But I feel like even before they reached their conclusion, that we were all saying, this feels like it can't be done in this space of time, that this is not only window dressing, but that the FBI, in order to complete the scene here, is going to have to fake this thing. They can't get a real investigation done in the amount of time that they've gotten. And I just think back to the Republicans who, bought themselves cover for their vote confirming him by saying, well, we had an investigation. But as it turns out, they really didn't. And I do feel like we knew that at the time. But now I guess we have it confirmed. I don't know. Let's see how Joan synthesizes things. Like I said, I had a couple other articles. I had the New York Times, I'm sure, very detailed look at it, but then, although it does say it's only a 3-minute read, whereas the Slate piece that I put aside says it's a 4-minute read, and typically Slate will be more analytical, and I want to read that one too because I think it was Dahlia Lithwick, and you can't do that much better than reading Joan and Dahlia Lithwick on something like this. So I don't know, let's do it. Here's what Joan has to say. The FBI, she tells us what that whole thing stands for, because that's a journalistic thing. And if you're new to the world, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, has now admitted that it failed to investigate even the most relevant of the 4,500 tips that it received during an, I guess we should say, quote, investigation. This is as much an investigation as Arizona's audit is an audit. That it received during its investigation into sexual assault allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. You remember all of that. Then a Supreme Court nominee, we might as well also say then a sitting judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered by many to be the second most powerful court in the land, certainly a feeder court for the Supreme Court. But yes, then a Supreme Court nominee, now a Supreme Court justice. That was in response to a 2-year-old letter from Democratic Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Chris Coons. That is our finding out that they've admitted that they've failed to investigate is the result of this 2-year-old letter in which Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Chris Coons wrote and said the response to which simply says, we apologize. The FBI says, we apologize for the extended delay in responding. Says Assistant Director Jill Tyson, which is problem number one, Joan goes on to say, for the Senate Judiciary Committee, of which Whitehouse and Coons are members. The FBI and Director Christopher Wray. Wray was the original recipient of the August 19th, 2019 letter from the senators, a letter which was, that's a letter from a senator, is a letterer. I don't know where I just invented that word from, but a letter which was ignored until June 30th, 2021, somehow. Wray was the person ultimately responsible for how the FBI handled the background investigation with that tip line, which ended up apparently just being a dumping ground. Whitehouse and Coons first pressed Wray on this in a July 2019 hearing. So they wrote about it in, when? August, but they had already pressed him in a hearing in July of 2019. They already knew then, pretty much. They wouldn't likely have asked the questions they asked unless they had a good inkling of what had happened in this investigation. But I do think that there were people asking that question. Pardon me, people asking that question at the time and saying, you've given yourself, what would they do? Delay the hearings for a week and say, well, we'll do a FBI investigation. In a week, you probably won't even name the agent in charge inside of a week. During the hearing, Wray echoed Republican claims that the FBI conducted the investigation, quote, by the book, while asserting that supplemental background investigations are less rigorous than criminal and counterintelligence investigations. The senators say in a press release following the revelation that the FBI did nothing more than send the tips to Trump's henchmen. Yeah, here, this was supposed to be the benefit of reading the boring, dry background piece from the New York Times first. That I think everybody knows the story by now, but basically, well, here's how we'll do the investigation. We'll set up a tip line. If you know anything about Brett Kavanaugh and the way he behaved during these years and you have something to say about it, call our tip line. Let us know what you saw and what we ought to be investigating. And not only did they not listen, or take the tips seriously, they didn't even handle the tips. They took the tips and handed them over to the White House lawyers who were defending Kavanaugh in his nomination. They just gave it over to the defense. That's not only not an investigation, that's actually doing the opposite of an investigation and just feeding all the evidence to the defense first and not acting on it from the other side. And I know the FBI isn't necessarily supposed to be the prosecution in this per se, but they are supposed to be looking into the tips, not simply giving the Kavanaugh team ammunition to preemptively attack the tipsters. So, the senators fired off another letter Thursday. The admissions in your letter corroborate and explain numerous credible accounts by individuals and firms that they had contacted the FBI with information highly relevant to allegations of sexual misconduct by Justice Kavanaugh, only to be ignored, the senators write in a sternly worded letter. If the FBI, and it means something when Joan notes that it's a sternly worded letter, it may actually be, it could be that they actually were sternly worded, but reminder for everybody that stern words don't do very much, and I think she's very well aware of that, and so there's a lot of levels to her decision to use sternly worded letter here. If the FBI was not authorized to or did not follow up on any of the tips that it received from the tip line, it is difficult to understand the point of having a tip line at all. Yes, I think so. The letter demands more answers, potentially in pursuit of what will possibly be a future oversight investigation by the Judiciary Committee. But, whoop-de-doo, the guy is still a justice, right? That's the point of the second sentence in the headline today. What will Democrats do about it? Because if it's not, that is, not part of a future oversight investigation, what the hell's the point? There has to be accountability from Wray and others to explain why exactly the Trump White House called the shots on this. Honestly, Wray's job needs to be in jeopardy here. There's the very real possibility that the FBI director lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee in July of 2019 when he told the senators that the investigation into allegations against Kavanaugh were by the book. Yeah, I think so. But you saw what happened to Wilbur Ross when he lied to congressional committees. Nothing. All right. The committee needs to put all of the heat they can muster on him, and if necessary, on his boss, Attorney General Merrick Garland, until they get some goddamn answers. That goes for all the questions White House raised in a follow-up demand to Garland in March of this year. In his follow-up letter to Garland, White House wrote, if standard procedures were violated and the Bureau conducted a fake investigation rather than a sincere, thorough, and professional one, that, in my view, merits congressional oversight to understand how, why, and at whose behest, and with whose knowledge or connivance this was done. Donald Trump. I mean, he knows that that's the ultimate answer, obviously, and he should be pursuing that. This follow-up letter to Garland is apparently the impetus for the FBI to dust off its inbox and find and respond to the original inquiry from 2019. But it certainly doesn't answer all of their questions. Now, granted, the FBI was under the control of Donald Trump for most of that time, and there was probably an instruction, don't answer that letter. We don't want to answer that letter. And you might hope that 6 months would have exceeded their expectations for how long to respond to letters from Democratic senators that had been ignored during the Trump administration of the Department of Justice. But who knows how big that backlog is, right? So I don't know if I can blame them too much for waiting the 6 months, but obviously there was a decision not to respond earlier, and that too needs to be examined with an eye toward actually, holding someone accountable and punishing someone, or at least getting them to say who made them do it, and then doing something about finding out that what we all know, that Donald Trump essentially directed all of this, even if he was mentally incapable of doing it himself. He had his henchmen do it. And I don't know. I mean, somebody's head ought to be knocked in with a baseball bat. But, we don't do that in this country. So whatever it is we do in this country, we ought to get to it. Pardon me. So let's see. While they're at it, Joan continues, Senate Democrats need to start probing again how Kavanaugh managed to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card debt between May 2017 and his nomination in July of 2018. And on top of that, pay $92,000 in country club fees and the $10,500 a year tuition for his 2 kids in private school, and make payments on the $815,000 mortgage he had for his $1.2 million plus home. Because all of that is still very, very hinky, as she says, borrowing that phrase. After all, federal judges don't make that much money. I mean, they don't make $92,000 in country club fees plus $10,500 a year tuition for each of 2 kids, plus pay for an $815,000 mortgage, plus pay off all of that credit card debt and have season tickets to the Nats, etc., on a federal judge's salary. And certainly not paying it all off and getting in the clear inside of a couple months. That leads us to problem number 2 for Senate Democrats and for President Joe Biden. There is a seated Supreme Court justice who has been credibly alleged to have committed assault, who has not been investigated, and whose finances are questionable, to say the least. That's right. First, this. Let's see. A tweet from Brian Fallon included here. There is nothing stopping Democrats in the House and or Senate from interviewing the witnesses that the FBI never spoke to and collecting the FBI tips the Trump White House apparently buried as part of its own investigation into whether Kavanaugh committed perjury. That's from a former senior aide to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, former Justice Department staff, and now Executive Director of Demand Justice. So yes, Congress can most definitely conduct the investigation where the FBI failed. The results of these investigations could lead potentially to impeachment of Kavanaugh, though there's a long shot and potentially that's a long shot and potentially a long way away. True, and you know how these things go. Probably not. Right now, Kavanaugh is just one of 3 Trump Supreme Court justices who are there in the most dubious of circumstances. Neil Gorsuch is in a seat stolen from President Barack Obama. Hey, Merrick Garland, you might be interested in that one. Stolen by Mitch McConnell. Kavanaugh was not properly vetted, no matter how you look at it. Amy Coney Barrett was rushed onto the court just days before the 2020 election, while people were already casting their ballots, because Trump thought she would give him the majority that would overturn the election in case he lost, which he did. This dubious trio joins the inarguably corrupt Clarence Thomas, whose wife Ginny spent the whole of 2020 amplifying Trumpist conspiracy theories about Biden on social media. They, with Alito, are the Supreme Court majority, the ones who all but ended voting rights and allowed for even more secrecy and dark money to flood our system. What they have planned for next session is even worse. The Supreme Court is packed with dangerous ideologues and a few corrupt ones, too. Now, President Biden and Democrats have a chance to, unpack it, to dilute the Trump RNC Koch Federalist Society's malign influence and balance it out with 4 or 6 or however many additional justices. It is imperative and it is existential. So thanks, June. I appreciate having your view so readily available on this one. Let me see if, at this point, does the New York Times bias anything? Let's go instead to Dahlia Lithwick writing in Slate to put a different spin on things, slightly different point. We now know what the FBI did with the 4,500 Kavanaugh tips it collected in 2018. We did, even before Dahlia told us. But okay, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has spent nearly 3 years attempting to understand the nature of the FBI's, quote, supplemental investigation of claims that emerged against Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings in the summer of 2018. The senator's attempts to get answers from either the Trump White House or the FBI were largely unsuccessful while Trump was still in office, but White House kept trying. Almost as soon as Merrick Garland was sworn in as Attorney General, White House asked him to help facilitate proper oversight by the Senate into questions about how serious the FBI supplemental investigation really was. White House asked Garland to explain why there was no mechanism for witnesses to report their accounts to the FBI, and why, after the FBI decided to create a tip line, nobody was ever told how the tips were evaluated. In his March letter to Garland, White House described that tip line as more like a garbage chute, with everything that came down the chute consigned without review to the figurative dumpster. White House asked Garland to explain how, why, and at whose behest the FBI conducted a, quote, fake investigation that violated standard procedures, to say the least. White House also asked Garland to probe into the tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt that mysteriously vanished from Kavanaugh's life in 2016. And it seems he has finally gotten at least some answers. On Wednesday morning, White House's office released a June 30th letter from FBI Assistant Director Jill Tyson. The letter is a response to an even older request sent by White House and Chris Coons, asking similar questions about the supplemental background investigation. This one sent in August of 2019, as Joan told you. Among other revelations, Tyson's letter indicates that the FBI's supplemental investigation happened at the direction of the White House, that the most relevant of the 4,500 tips the agency received were referred back to the White House in the Trump administration, and that in the days of the follow-up investigation, 10 people were interviewed. It doesn't say this, she notes parenthetically here, but other reporting has confirmed that neither Christine Blasey Ford nor Kavanaugh were among those 10 people. No extra interviews for either of them. The letter clarifies that this was a supplemental background check, not a criminal investigation, because that what was sought by the White House counsel's office. They obviously weren't going to ask for a criminal investigation. White House and Coons, joined by 5 other Democratic senators, sent a follow-up letter to FBI Director Chris Wray, dated Wednesday, asking for an explanation of how the tips were evaluated, what follow-up occurred, and why the FBI failed to interview key witnesses. As they put it, if the FBI was not authorized to or did not follow up on any of the tips that it received from the tip line, it is difficult to understand the point of having a tip line at all. In other words, was this a sham investigation? White House tweeted on Wednesday, I meant to pick up on those too, but this will help us, that he believes that that facts that were hidden and suppressed at the time still need to be made public, especially in light of the current debate about reforming the judicial ethics rules that do not apply to the justices. And he said that part of the reason he has persisted in his investigation of the fake FBI investigation is because he made a promise to Christine Blasey Ford at the hearings that he would not deny her the rigorous inquiry that her life-altering decision to come forward should have received. It is, in a sense, hard to be horrified by the explicit confirmation from the FBI that this was indeed a sham investigation, simply because much of this was known at the time, and more has emerged since. There are some links here to the proof that that was the case, in case you're interested and want to refresh your memory. The sham occurred in plain view, as did the decision to dismiss all of the 83 judicial ethics complaints lodged against Kavanaugh at the time, because Supreme Court justices are not bound by the judicial ethics regime tasked with investigating them. By the way, that's a good reminder. That may be true, but the members of the D.C. Circuit Court are bound by those ethical requirements and the judicial ethics regime. And if it helps you get past procedural squeamishness, I say impeach him from the D.C. Circuit Court. Just as we learned that you can impeach a president after the president leaves office, let's say you can also impeach someone from the D.C. Circuit Court after they've left that and moved on, whether by retiring or taking another job or being promoted to the Supreme Court or whatever. So go ahead and do that. If you think you can't make the case for impeachment of Kavanaugh from the Supreme Court based, even in part, if not solely, on the notion that, well, you're impeaching him for violation of an ethical code that doesn't apply to him technically because that doesn't apply to the Supreme Court, which should, but it doesn't, then say, fine, we'll impeach him from the D.C. Circuit Court, after which he would be banned from, we will say, let's vote that would be the case, ban him from federal service. That would have the effect of removing him from the Supreme Court without having to impeach him from the Supreme Court under a standard that doesn't apply to the Supreme Court. Just deal with the standard that applied to him when he was on the D.C. Circuit Court and try him for those things and be done with it. Just a reminder that I think that's a perfectly valid way to proceed. It's not my fault that, that's the path you took to the court. You left footprints behind for us to use against you. If you had come out of the blue and appeared at first, our first public knowledge of you as a nominee to the Supreme Court, then fine, you'd be able to make that claim and say, sorry, the ethical obligations just don't apply to me. So where do we leave off here? Right. In a sense, then, because the shamming always happened openly, the revelation that it was, this is really going to town here, was shamatory feels underwhelming. We have become so inured to all the shamming in plain sight that having it confirmed years later barely even feels like news. Yeah, okay, that's the problem, I think, and we're all feeling the same thing. But it still behooves me to point out, she says, that even though it's not clear anything can be done to someday see or evaluate those 4,500 unexamined tips sent to Don McGahn's team, the same team, of course, that was being tasked with confirming Kavanaugh to the bench and later was trying to cover their own asses in the impeachment hearings for the president, or about the, I got to remind myself of how this sentence starts. It behooves me to point out that even though it's not clear anything can be done about the 4,500 unexamined tips or about the 83 ethics complaints that were sent to the shredder, I think you can. One thing has changed. Or she stresses here, one thing has changed. Brett Kavanaugh is now the reliably median swing justice on the most conservative Supreme Court in almost a century. A court in which John Roberts may occasionally vote with the liberal wing so it can lose by a 5-4 margin. It is Kavanaugh that may well bring about the demise of abortion protections, robust voter protections, gun safety laws, and a host of other doctrinal changes that have made the court more pro-business and more anti-worker every year. So it isn't just that Kavanaugh has lifetime tenure at the High Court because there was no meaningful investigation of whether he was qualified. It is also that due to his new swing-ish vote status, every litigant who appears before him, every Supreme Court advocate who wants to curry favor, every lower court judge in the land, and every other sitting Supreme Court justice must devote their days to efforts to praise and charm and win him over, which means that the only way to win at the High Court involves Washington absolving him every single day of allegations that were not even surfaced, much less adjudicated by any fact-finding entity. And if that's not absolute power, I'm not really sure what is. Well put and well argued there, and now I feel almost certain that reading through the matter-of-fact recitation from the New York Times is not worth it, so we'll skip that part and get ready for our top of the hour second break. Speaking of, judicially adjacent topics and procedural topics. Maybe we can sneak a little bit of this in. Armando tweeting just the other day about, a number of things. He started off here by saying, can we have some agreed facts on 1/6, the January 6th insurrection? I happen to think the most important fact is that it would have been unconstitutional, as he's argued many times, for Pence or Congress to reject the certified electoral votes of the states submitted to Congress for counting on 1/6, right? Something that he and many others have said. As a matter of fact, maybe what I'll do is, I'll keep going. I know I'm going to bump into this thing here, but there was no segue here between topics. Just, I guess, constitutional law is the only common link here. But you've heard Armando make this argument before, but I wanted to remind everybody of it because it's back in the news. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution states that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct electors. The electors to the Electoral College. Every state did so. There is no dispute on this point. That a state legislature didn't like the end result and wanted to overrule it is irrelevant constitutionally. The state legislature's power was to direct the manner. We've had that argument here on this show. After that, it has no role. None. In the future, it can abolish elections, but for 2020, its role was over. I just kind of wanted to sneak that in there because that's the important point in understanding all of the delusional Trump supporters who say, no, it was unconstitutional for them to allow more drop boxes even during COVID in this or that state because the Board of Elections was the one that decided how many boxes there would be and what the procedure would be for using them and where they would go. And the legislature is the one that needs to do that under the clause that says that they determine the manner of the appointment of electors. But yeah, like I've argued before, that has nothing to do with it. What that means is that the legislature gets to direct whether there will be a popular election to determine who the electors from your state will be, or some other method of selecting them, whether by direct appointment by the legislature or anything else. The rules by which whatever contest they call for being established being laid out, that's a delegable task, and most states, all states really, do in fact delegate that to their boards of election. That has nothing to do with what manner of selection means. We'll be back with more. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, the more I think about it, the less sense the non-segue made, but I want to read through this thread just to remind everybody of the importance of this stuff as we are moving ahead with trials of insurrectionists from January 6th, as the Republican Party attempts to recast itself and its take on January 6th as well. I discourage this, I don't endorse the violence, or I don't think necessarily that there might have been all of this fraud, but we should investigate, to no, this is really actually a good thing. Ashley Babbitt is a martyr, that we should investigate everyone who stood in the way of our insistence that the Electoral College vote ought to have been thrown out. They are the real traitors, and we ought to bring them to account. This is an important reiteration. So again, it's Armando's argument, and had been my own as well, that my part of it was that the Republican claim that having anyone in any state except for the legislature itself make any rules at all that bear in any way, shape, or form on how elections are conducted is, and that decision being made by anyone but the legislature being facially unconstitutional, is a fantasy and a complete misreading of what the Constitution calls for. It's always been my contention, and it's been upheld so far in all the courts that have touched it, that, what they're talking about is the legislature gets to decide whether there will be an election or some other method of selecting the electoral college representatives. The electors, of course, is what they call them, and that everything else is delegable, that the State Board of Elections can determine the brass tacks rules of how to conduct that election, or I guess if you decide to go with something other than an election, the State Board of whatever the hell other method. The State Board of coin flipping, I guess, would have to be established if you were going to appoint your electors that way. Anyway, but on top of that, there is also Armando's point that there's nothing in the Electoral Count Act that authorizes anything even remotely like what Trump and Trump supporters were insisting that Pence had an obligation to do and that he was authorized by law to do. He's in fact not authorized to do anything of the sort. So, as he puts it, there's no dispute about the first point, that every state legislature has the opportunity to decide whether or not there will be an election, and they all did take that opportunity. But the fact that they don't like the result or that they don't like the way the election itself was conducted is not an invitation to their overturning the results. Not that they aren't trying to authorize that by law now, after the fact, or in preparation for the 2024 elections. The state legislature's power was, as Armando says, simply to direct the manner. And after that, the legislature's job is done. It has no role. In the future, it can abolish elections, but for 2020, whenever they made the decision that their electors would be selected by popular election in their state, that was the end of the task for them. That they never took up the question of whether to change that, that's their own business. But that was their only continuing role in the process. The option to change from an election to some other method, and they have refused to do it. So after the appointment of state electors, by the rules that were set years ago, those electors meet at the state capitol to vote as prescribed by the 12th Amendment. That's easy. That happened, of course, on December 16th. Certification of those results were prepared and transmitted to the President of the Senate, as per the 12th Amendment also. And, in addition, also as per the 12th Amendment, the President of the Senate opens and counts the electoral votes in the presence of the Congress. The role is to count. There's nothing in there about, well, and if you think there's something wrong with it, you should do something, or you should throw out, or that it's up to you, or that you should even ask the Senate or the House or both what to do with those things. The job is to count. That's it. Of course, he points out, in 1876, the question of which of the multiple sets of electoral votes that showed up was the proper certified results from certain states became an issue. Some states sent two. Now, some states alleged to have sent two this time, but in fact, I guess I should say, no state as the state, and this is the second day in a row where we will say states qua states, right? No state authority told the President of the Senate, Mike Pence, or anyone else for that matter, that there was more than one possible correct and official and recognizable set of electoral votes being sent to Washington. Other people in those states said, yeah, they are. These are legit. But the state never said so. No state authority sent any more than one set of certified electoral votes. Unlike in 1876, where competing state authorities sent different slates. And when that happened, they had a problem, and they decided to try and design a way out of it afterwards, so that if it ever happened again, you would know what to do. But it hasn't happened, and it didn't happen in 2020 either. But as he says, in 1876, the question of which was the proper certified result came from certain states became an issue. There were competing votes submitted, like officially. Unlike this time when a bunch of citizens said, well, we think ours should be official. Here, nobody else thought so. And it's unclear what even happened to those things. I'd like to know exactly what physically happened to them. That might help clarify things. Anyway, but when there were competing votes submitted, there was a question of which votes do you count? The Constitution didn't provide an answer back in 1876, and they had a crisis as a result. And as a result of that crisis, the Congress created a process for sorting out when there are competing electors slates, but that was irrelevant in 2020 and 2016 because there weren't competing officially endorsed elector slates before them. There were no competing slates submitted by any state for counting. In this case, an illegal and unconstitutional action was being urged by Trump and Republicans to throw out the certified electors for certain states. This was authoritarian and outrageous. It was a lie. Why did the riots of January 6th happen? He then asks. Because Trump and Republicans sought to unlawfully and unconstitutionally throw out the results of the election among the congressmen who, I missed a period there, because they unlawfully and unconstitutionally tried to throw out an election. Among the congressmen who tried to do this was Jim Jordan. That's why it's back in the news and back on Armando's mind. He was part of the cause of January 6th. That is objective fact, as he puts it. The premise of any reporting on January 6th and the January 6th committee must start with these objective facts. What Trump and Republicans sought was an unlawful and unconstitutional overturning of the election, and every piece of commentary on the subject must start there. If this is not understood by any reporter as an objective fact, then they have nothing worth listening to about January 6th. And that's actually his complete conclusion right there. But that probably should have been part of the initial segue. Just now after the fact, you understand how it is that this examination of electoral counting law is back in the news. Of course, it's the attempted assignment of Jim Jordan by Republicans in the House to the committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. And of course, they were hoping that one or more of the insurrectionists would be assigned to the panel so that they could exonerate the Republicans as a party and Donald Trump as a candidate from any blame in any of this, even though there's really nowhere else to lay the blame and no other conclusion you could possibly reach. But they were hoping to anyway. So following up all of this illegal and unconstitutional activity with assigning one of the co-conspirators to the investigation of the illegal and unconstitutional activity and trying to explain it. How will that come out? All right. I teased you earlier with the headline from Business Insider. Let's take a quick look at that one. That was the headline that said that, there's a paywall in the way all of a sudden. Okay. Wasn't the case yesterday. I should have read it to you then. Now let me see if we can read it in the pocket version. Michael Cohen says he thinks Jared Kushner has already flipped on Trump. Written up by, I hope if this identifies him correctly, Thomas Colson at Business Insider. Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal attorney, you remember him, said that he thought Jared Kushner had already flipped on his father-in-law as the criminal investigation into Trump's business empire intensifies. Cohen did not offer any evidence, and that's a problem, but said he thought that was the case because of how little Kushner has been mentioned. Cohen tweeted on Wednesday that Kushner's name had been absent from all the controversy, indictments, and arrests related to the investigation. He speculated that this was because Kushner was already cooperating with prosecutors. It's interesting, he tweets, how Jared Kushner, whose Twitter handle he then uses, and then he hashtags it Secretary of Everything. But interesting how Jared Kushner's name appears to be absent from all the controversy, indictments, and arrests, Cohen tweeted. Is he next to fall or a cooperating witness? Knowing what a snake he is, I bet the latter. Well, you know what a snake Michael Cohen is, or was anyway. Cohen was one of Trump's most trusted confidants, but their relationship deteriorated in 2017. Federal prosecutors investigated Cohen over hush money payments made to women who they said had affairs with Trump, who said they had affairs with Trump, and over Cohen's comments to Congress about Trump's business dealings in Russia. Cohen pleaded guilty to federal crimes, including lying to Congress, which I didn't even think was a crime anymore, tax evasion, and bank fraud. Cohen, who is serving the rest of his sentence under house arrest, has become one of Trump's most vocal critics. He's cooperated with prosecutors and provided evidence against his former boss since at least 2019 in a bid for a more lenient sentence. Representatives for Kushner did not immediately respond to requests for comment. On July 1st, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office issued a 15-count indictment against the Trump Organization and Alan Weisselberg, its chief financial officer, including charges of grand larceny and tax fraud. Prosecutors described a years-long scheme by the executives at the company to avoid taxes. The indictment against Weisselberg listed an unnamed co-conspirator twice, leading to speculation that one of Trump's immediate family members could be the next to face charges. Weisselberg, one of Trump's most trusted staffers, had told prosecutors that he would not flip on his boss, the Washington Post reported in June. Commentators have since speculated that the prospect of criminal charges and prison time could tempt members of Trump's family to turn on him. Cohen alleged in June that Kushner and his wife, Ivanka Trump, had been involved in creating false documentary evidence on Donald Trump's behalf. No evidence of that has emerged. Mary Trump, the former president's estranged niece, has speculated that Ivanka could be persuaded to provide evidence against her father. As counterintuitive as this might sound, I think Ivanka has, one, more to lose, and two, more to hang on to. Her husband's family is legitimately very wealthy, she told the Daily Beast earlier in July, raising questions, I guess, about whether or not the president himself, the former president, is in fact actually wealthy. So it is entirely possible. And of course, Kushner's family has some experience with doing prison time, and his father might have passed on, hey, do anything you can to avoid having that happen. All right, a couple of other items to include here, plus some feedback and suggestions from others in the audience. Bill also chiming in this morning on the "Why won't Hillary go away" observation, noting that no one, as far as I can recall, told Mitt Romney to go away after 2012. And what is he up to these days again? After all, stayed in politics, found himself in elective office again, and not for president, but so it doesn't get as much attention as Trump does or Hillary could potentially have gotten, but still a good point. And certainly if losing the presidential election means you have to shut up and go away because obviously you don't have your finger on the pulse of America, then go away already. Let's see. A couple other suggestions. Oh, well, some of these will have us jumping to different topics. I'll stick for the moment to what I had up next. I thought this was a pretty interesting thing. Maybe you observed this thread on Twitter and the aftermath of the thread on Twitter from John Schwartz, who has been for some time now tweeting along these lines, but I guess he revived the tweet thread recently, and I had it brought to my attention and I was watching it, and now he's decided to write up a piece for The Intercept on what actually was going on here that will bring you back to the origin of this thread, what it was about, and the peculiar genius behind it. And it's all made clear in the headline here that John writes, "I tried to make claims about election fraud so preposterous Trump fans wouldn't believe me. It was impossible." See what's going on here? "I was acting as Trump and his minions do," he says in the subheader, "free to say anything, no matter how ridiculous, with no basis in observable fact." And that sounds like a very fun and liberating thing to try to do. Were you familiar with the tweet thread? I mean, it will explain things as we go along here. "The most beautiful and most terrifying Twitter experience of my life. One that made me laugh so hard I got hiccups. Yikes. While also convincing me that humans are destined to obliterate themselves, began with several small jokes, like this, a few days before the 2016 election." I'm just going to pause here for a second on the hiccups thing to say he laughed so hard he got hiccups. I don't think it's ever happened to me, but didn't I read the other day that the president of Brazil, Bolsonaro, right? That he was hospitalized not long ago because he had like a case of hiccups that went on for 4 days or something like that. I can't imagine having to suffer through something like that. But if I were to imagine it, I would imagine it happening to someone like Bolsonaro or perhaps Donald Trump. Seems obvious, but okay. Anyway, so what was this joke that started a few days before the 2016 election? John Schwartz, is this the original here? Yes, November 1st, 2016. Responding to this tweet, I guess maybe the original idea but then belongs to Nick Bauman tweeting, "I love my job working at a voting site in Washington, D.C., destroying Trump ballots." And John responding here, "My guess is that at least 75% of the MSM, mainstream media, including me, has a side job destroying Trump ballots." And you know exactly who that would set off and in what way. It ended, this whole line of jokes, this past week with an unhealthy 84 tweet long thread by me and a quote tweet by General Michael Flynn's brother, Joseph. Mike Flynn, of course, the notorious spy. His other brother, not currently in the military, Joseph, informing his 400,000 Twitter followers of my malfeasance. Quoted here then is Joseph Flynn's tweet. "Left-wing nutjob writer from The Intercept admits publicly to destroying Trump ballots in collusion with other journalists and the U.S. Postal Service." I don't know where the Postal Service part came from, but it's 84 tweets. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. And he quotes John's tweet, includes it here, wherein he reiterates the joke. "I'm still proud of all the work that myself and all my MSM friends did destroying Trump ballots, and also amazed that only a few sharp-eyed, intrepid investigators, such as," somebody he names who picked up on it earlier, Natalie, "have figured it out." Pointing again back to, I guess, the tweet of this person, Natalie, picking up on the joke, but not, finding the joke, but not understanding the joke. Then neither does Joseph Flynn understand it. Everything in between the 2016 tweets and the ones from last weekend, everything in between happened because the right wing has a problem, John says. They know that the 2020 election was stolen, but despite their mighty efforts, have failed to uncover any evidence for this. Granted, this isn't a huge problem for them, since they care about evidence about as much as the Dalai Lama cares about getting on Bumble. Well, okay, it's a long walk for that joke, but we got it. Still, they've been experiencing some modest cognitive dissonance that they'd prefer to resolve. The ideal solution would be a member of the hated mainstream media openly confessing that he and his colleagues don't just put their thumb on the scales during their day jobs, but are also so committed to cheating that they moonlight to do it directly. My 2016 tweets were that solution. Natalie Winters, that's Natalie from his tweet, whose Twitter bio says she's a student at the University of Chicago. Well, that's a prestigious university. Had already written an article last year illustrated with my enormous head looming over a vulnerable mail-in ballot. Then, last Thursday, she started tweeting again about my criminality. I loved the idea that my compatriots and I had been openly bragging about our destruction of Trump ballots in a public forum. Yet only she, with her dogged investigative prowess, had been able to run us to ground. Then I got another tweet, demanding that I be arrested. I decided to say something so preposterous that no one could miss that I'd been joking all along. And he says, arrest me? Arrest me for what? It's totally legal for the media to destroy Trump ballots. That's pretty amazing. But this didn't work either. Instead, it seemed to just draw more and more outraged responses. So I started claiming that the right to destroy Trump ballots had been written into the Constitution by the Founding Fathers, and that people didn't realize this because we've stopped teaching civics in public schools. When someone tagged the FBI Twitter account in hopes that it would investigate. I explained that the whole project to destroy Trump ballots had been the Bureau's idea in the first place. Now, I mean, the fact that nobody picks up on this, and instead they just become more and more outraged, not just at his claims, but I can't believe it. The FBI's idea, that's even worse. They believe that part wholesale. So this also did not work. So I went beyond man's law to God's. The 10 Commandments demand that you shred Trump ballots, I said. When someone warned that I would be punished by karma in the end, I explained that they'd misunderstood what karma is. I wish people, he says, would take the time to learn about karma. It's a Buddhist concept in which you are reborn into a better life if you destroy tons of Trump ballots. There's nothing you can do to shake these guys. Even this did not stop the deluge. On the contrary, when Flynn directed his audience to my anti-American proclamations, it exploded in intensity. I also found that I couldn't stop myself. When someone tagged in government agencies, I did the same for all kinds of different authorities. So, for instance, somebody here says tagging FBI, DOJ, do your job, pointing to Schwartz and his tweets. And Schwartz adds copies to the NSA, CIA, the White House, State Department, Commerce Department, NASA, the police, but the band, Oprah, Jesus, Walgreens, Nutella USA, and OnlyFans support. Well, someone will nail them, right? One of that group. my money's on Nutella, I think, to finally bring him to justice. When I received voluminous physical threats, I responded with blithe, friendly incomprehension. Somebody says, where do you live? I would love to meet you in an elevator sometime. To which he says, it would be great to meet in an elevator. That's actually one of the best places to destroy Trump ballots. I can show you how to do it. And you can tell me about how your grandchildren never like your posts on Facebook. This may be the way to handle them if you can handle death threats. Sometimes I revealed that tweets that seemed to be from right-wing patriots were actually from members of the conspiracy. For instance, the tweet of Frank Castle Rock, who you know is legit. You may know him as Frank CA 354-88730, the sign of legitimacy. Frank Castle Rock saying, and you are a total POS. Haha, get it? Wink, wink, piece of, okay. Right, there will be no mercy, he says in all caps with 2 exclamation points. Keep running, keep hiding, and definitely keep tweeting. To which John says, going to let everyone in here on some of the behind-the-scenes inside baseball of destroying Trump ballots. These 2 dot ellipses, which he uses here, that is, here, and you are a total POS, exclamation point, dot, dot. There will be no mercy, exclamation point, dot, dot. Just 2 dots. Keep running, keep hiding, yada, yada, right? These 2 dot ellipses are a code we use to secretly tell each other, I love destroying Trump ballots. This is a great joke from my buddy Frank, which, of course, I'm sure sent him up the wall. And, of course, I brought in blockchain as well as, responding to a tweet from Napoleona, I guess, sorry. You can burn your ballot, but destroying other people's ballots, no matter who they voted for, is a federal crime. You are so dumb for admitting this here. John says, legal notice. By responding to my tweet, you have been auto-enrolled via blockchain technology in a program that deducts $100 a day from your bank accounts to fund the destruction of Trump ballots. Do not reply to avoid being enrolled again. I don't have the words to describe the happiness and psychological relief this has brought me, John says. Only around tweet number 50 did I comprehend how mentally oppressive I've come to find it to live in a country in which about a quarter of the people are, for all intents and purposes, members of a cult. What made the whole thing especially rewarding was using their own modus operandi against them. As a journalist, I'm constantly anxious about making sure every sentence, every word is accurate. Now, I was acting as Trump and his minions do, right? As he said in the subheader here. Free to say anything, no matter how asinine or ridiculous, with no basis in observable fact, and with no sense of responsibility towards others. The only thing that mattered was my own needs from second to second, and it felt fantastic, I have often wondered. But I simultaneously began to experience a growing sense of psychological gloom. Partly it was the sorrow and loneliness emanating from the Trumpist tweets. The through line through all of them was a sincere fury from people about their lives, directed at imaginary causes. And I imagine that is a little sad to realize, but we'll continue poking fun at it later. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take, or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Last segment before the weekend, but I'm going to continue with this amazing article from John Schwartz about his experience in trolling Trump land, but noticing that as liberating as it was to simply say whatever you felt like saying, no matter how asinine and ridiculous, no basis in fact, and more importantly, I think no sense of responsibility toward others. The only thing that mattered was my own needs from second to second, and it felt fantastic, but I simultaneously began to experience a growing sense of psychological gloom. Partly it was the sorrow and loneliness emanating from the Trumpist tweets, the through line being a sincere fury from people about their lives, directed at imaginary causes. That is very sad and upsetting in its own right. Clearly, most of them had no one trustworthy with whom they could talk through their problems and possible solutions. Instead, they only had the inhuman online community of their fellow rageheads. What was worse, though, was the overwhelming sense that this was just a more intense version of the human condition, that our brains simply aren't designed to comprehend the world around us. Instead, their main priority is keeping us part of the tribe. Absolutely anything can be ignored if awareness of it might exile us from our little group, and all actions up to and including violence are justified to prevent us from becoming aware of facts that contradict our belief system. That's why I've decided to delete all those tweets in the next few days, but go look at them now, I guess. But I'm not worried about the threats toward me. But as with other old Twitter jokes that I deleted when David Duke and his fan club became aware of them, I'm concerned that there's a small but real chance of some of these tweets someday showing up in a mass shooter's manifesto. It's true that they've now escaped the lab, and I can't recall them all, but at least removing the original source may reduce their spread. So, if you'd like to learn about how James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers that, quote, the true citizen must destroy all Trump ballots, which of course he types out as DEFTROY, like the old style S that looks like an F to us. The true citizen must destroy all Trump ballots in the Federalist number 52, as he claims. Or the retired anesthesiologist who held the lives of thousands of patients in his hands over decades and is now enraged that the Justice Department hasn't thrown me in jail. Number 63. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, that's tweet number 63. I thought he was trying to say that Madison wrote in Federalist 52 this line, but I was tweet 52. in which he makes this joke. Well, if you want to read those, the clock is ticking. He links to them, and I don't know whether the link is still good. Let's see. Start here and read down and down and down. Are they still there? Yes. Okay, so there you are, starting with the I'm still proud of all the work that myself and the MSM did. If you feel like it, it's there. In his conclusion, he says, for my part, I'll be contemplating whether the problems that humanity faces are simply beyond our capacity to handle. We only have one tool to deal with them, basic rationality about reality, and there's nothing our minds hate more than that. So that'll either entertain you or depress you for the weekend, and I'm sure it's his hope that it'll be a little bit of both, and that way he'll feel it was more meaningful in all of this. All right, let's see. On to other weird news that might otherwise get ignored. I thought this one was of some interest, something I picked up on Twitter, I don't know, probably Wednesday or so. And we've heard of these guys before, but you remember the constitutional sheriffs? Yes, these are the people who, inexplicably have come to the conclusion, although it is possible that they came to this conclusion because they're sheriffs. I don't know. But they've come to this conclusion that the only and ultimate authority in the United States under the Constitution are sheriffs. That is unusual. Not a whole lot of people think that. Most of the people who do think that are sheriffs or are interested in becoming sheriffs. And it's not entirely clear whether this particular sheriff decided to become sheriff because he believed that that would make him the ultimate authority, or whether he decided that sheriffs were the ultimate authority once he had realized he was a sheriff. And I'm not sure. And by the way, I mean, there's an analysis of the Constitution which under which you might say, for instance, you might remind yourself at some point, if you wanted to really, throw everything into doubt, that the Constitution, of course, was a replacement for the Articles of Confederation, and we don't focus on or talk enough about the fact that the Constitutional Convention was really extra legal in how it was convened. I mean, the then current government in this, it was all, was reportedly, according to our histories, widely recognized that the Articles of Confederation was ineffective, problematic, and in need of replacement, if not, at least radical reform. And then we sort of jump to the next thing. Well, then in Philadelphia, they convened a convention, because that's what you do with conventions, you convene them, of, prominent citizens delegated by the various states to draft a new solution. And it ended up being the Constitution. But that it was the contemporaneous understanding that at most what would be happening here would be a reformation of the existing Articles of Confederation, not an entirely new document that established an entirely different kind of government and, in fact, a very different kind of country than what they currently had, and that was not authorized by anybody in particular. That they authorized their work after the fact by requiring that the states ratify the results. The Constitution didn't become the governing document of the country without everybody's consent or anything like that. But you might question the legitimacy of the document based on how the convention was convened and under what understanding it was, and did they exceed their mandate? And also, curiously, if you look at the roles of what was still then the Continental Congress, the Congress under the Articles of Confederation, and then the first Congress convened under the Constitution later on, it's not, it doesn't 100% correlate, but basically what ends up happening here is that people who served in Congress said, well, yeah, the Articles of Confederation don't really work, and it might be a good idea to reform them so that we could do our job better. We'd be a more effective body and a more effective government for the United States if we came up with some different scheme or handed ourselves some different powers or whatever. And for the most part, they said, all right, well, we'll have the states send delegates to a convention, and they shouldn't send us. We're busy with the Constitution. But get some delegates together to tell us how we could do our job better. How could we be more effective for the people of the United States? And then what happened was the delegates got together and they designed a completely different system, which included dissolving the Continental Congress and reinventing it as the constitutional version of the United States Congress. And lo and behold, almost everybody who had served in the Continental Congress at that point ended up not finding their way onto the ballot or anything to serve in the new Congress under the Constitution. Whereas the system designed by the Constitutional Convention, by which, we now, because we're used to it, say, yes, this would be a good and fair way to determine who should represent the people in Congress in the United States of America. It also, as it happened to be very much to the advantage of, and it's reflected again in the rolls, of electing the people who went to the Constitutional Convention to Congress and to other various roles in the new federal government. And I guess, if you're designing something, if they sit you down and they say, what kind of person is trustworthy to serve in the United States government, and what sort of process would be, say, up to the task of guaranteeing their worthiness and all of that, I presume you would probably end up, too, whether consciously or not, designing a test that would ultimately result in your being selected as the trustworthy people who should run the United States government going forward. And that's exactly what happened. And so, I guess, in a sense, it's a long tradition that the sheriffs would then end up believing, actually, sheriffs have the most authority here in the United States. Well, anyway, that's where they've landed, these folks. And in particular, this particular Michigan sheriff reported on in TPM, Talking Points memo by Matt Schuham, dated from Wednesday, July 21st. Michigan sheriff alarms small-town clerks with shady Mike Lindell-inspired elections probe. This is an interesting crossing over from the constitutional sheriff's movement, if that's something you can call it, into election law. Now, I guess as the ultimate authority on everything constitutional, sure, sheriffs are going to have a role in the elections in this country, but that's not something they've spoken up about to date. Also, just as curious as sheriffs coming to the conclusion that they are, in fact, the ultimate legal authorities in the United States, is the fact that they have come to the conclusion that the best exercise of the ultimate authority in the entire United States has to date been about saying, well, that means I won't be enforcing gun laws locally, because my understanding of the Second Amendment is that there can't be any, and that's the way we're going to treat it in our area, and no one can gainsay this because I am the ultimate authority. And I choose to use this ultimate authority on nothing but guns. But now they've said, well, okay, guns and elections because of a pillow guy. I don't know how that happened exactly. A far-right sheriff in rural Michigan has sent a private investigator and a deputy sheriff, because, you got to go outside the sheriff's department for investigative authority, right? Who has time to investigate things as a sheriff? Well, he sent a deputy, so... He sent a deputy and a private investigator on a tedious journey from township to township, grilling clerks about their election processes in an apparent attempt to dig up non-existent evidence of elections crimes. The whole thing, the sheriff said, was inspired by conspiracy theories about the election, including those peddled by my pillow guy, Mike Lindell. And the clerks are none too happy about it. It seemed like they were looking to accuse people or places of fraud or potential fraud, is what it felt like, said Cindy Wilshire, clerk of Thornapple Township. And it's really amazing to watch these small town clerks, who are in many cases elected officials in their own right, or at least appointed because they're prominent, and active political people in their area, now being accused by the local sheriff. Well, there must have been fraud somewhere, and I'll check my little area for it. And everyone is, guilty until proven innocent, in my view, and that's okay because I'm the ultimate constitutional authority. I know you all thought it was innocent until proven guilty, but I'm the authority here. And I say it's the other way around. And he goes around pestering all these people and basically accusing them of fraud, which is real interesting because eventually, if he's checking around in his jurisdiction, he's going to have to stand for re-election at some point against all of these other locally politically active people who've, through their activity, found their way to the clerkships in their townships and have a knack for organizing voters. And I wonder whether he'll stay the ultimate authority on the Constitution or whether the county will decide that somebody else has a better understanding of the Constitution than he does. But that's what's going on. They say they're not questioning our integrity, but you almost kind of feel like they are, said Anita Mennell, M-E-N-N-E-L-L, clerk of Hastings Charter Township. I've been a clerk for 18 years, and I've had a spot-on election every time, said Robin Hawthorne, clerk of Rutland Township. We're all a little upset about this. The investigative duo ended some of their interviews in which they've asked about the procedures in place on Election Day and the programming of Dominion voting machines by saying they could return with even more questions about the election, several clerks told TPM. And I think that deserves dramatic music if anything does. We could return. I told them, I'm done talking, Hawthorne recalled. If you want to talk to me again, come back with a subpoena or a warrant, and that's not going to stop a sheriff, not a constitutional sheriff. He can sign his own, right? The probe is being overseen by Sheriff Dar Leaf. That's the guy's name, Dar. I don't know what that's short for, if anything. And his last name, I guess, is Leaf. One of a huddle, as they put it, of law enforcement officials around the country who self-describe as constitutional sheriffs. They assert, of course, that sheriff's legal authority trumps that of the state and federal government, based on the fact that they are those sheriffs, really. Leaf made a name for himself last year by offering a hedged public defense of the men accused of plotting to kidnap Michigan's governor. Wow. Leaf has been tight-lipped to media outlets about the probe. He didn't return an email from TPM, so he's tight-fingered as well, nor a message left with his assistant, and his investigators have told clerks not to tell others they've been interviewed. Based on what authority? I don't know. Constitution, as I read it. Not allowed to tell anybody. But he opened up about the investigation at this well-recognized central authority, organ of central authority, Arise USA, at an Arise USA rally on Friday, as Kalamazoo CBS affiliate WWMT first reported. The sheriff took the stage a few minutes after an organizer of the event, Robert David Steele, spoke about a, quote, satanic Masonic attempt to take over the world. See, there's these two cartoon mice. One's a Satanist and one's a Masonic, I don't know, what? A Masonic, whatever you are. A Mason. What do you call yourself? And they both want to take over the world. Now, this is interesting, too. Not only is it a satanic Masonic attempt, or satanic for short, that also includes the sonic abilities that they have. But in addition to their plot to take over the world, the Arise USA platform, I guess, or at least Robert David Steele's platform, is that Zionism, how did Zionism get in this? But Zionism is, in fact, a criminal state run by Russian criminals who pretend to be Jews. So this ends well. And if the Jews are off the hook on this one, it's Russian criminals. only pretending to be Jews. To the extent that you are angry with Zionists because of what they're doing, and you want to expand that anger and hold Jews of any stripe to account for the problems with Zionism, be warned, you're barking up the wrong tree. You need to be confronting Russian mobsters, not Jews, because that's who's really running Zionism. Not something I had thought about or believed in the past, but if it gets you off my back, by all means, go for it. I don't know how long a confrontation with Russian mobsters will last you. Good luck, but I think you're probably out of my hair, whatever happens. Anyway, Leaf, the sheriff, following Steele and Richard Mack, founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. You can be constitutional other kind of peace officer if you want. If you want some of the power, but you're not yet a sheriff, like let's say you're maybe mall security, I guess, you could be constitutional mall security if you pay the entry fee. Anyway, Mack and Leaf and Steele said the election probe, I guess this is really Leaf speaking here, said the election probe was, quote, my biggest task I've got going on. He went on to describe a complaint from a retired sergeant from his office that inspired the effort. So, by the way, I don't even know what county he's in, but apparently the sheriff of that county in Michigan, the biggest thing he's got going, he's not, isn't protecting you from home invasion or drug dealers or gangs. It is investigating the election because a retired sergeant from his office told him to. She brought in some documentation from the MyPillow guy. What's his name? Mike Lindell. And brought some documentation in from attorneys from Michigan. Wow. And Barry County's listed in there. So I guess he's from Barry County. And that was the big concern. Some information from some attorneys in Michigan was brought in, and I don't know what's in that information, but I do know that Barry County is listed in it. It might be a list of people who had no fraud, but we're listed, and that's the point. And so therefore I need to investigate. Mike Lindell, of course, it's noted here, has wasted millions pitching election lies. But back to Leaf. What's more, he said, an unnamed attorney friend called him shortly after the election. I don't know how this attorney got on without having a name, but I guess you can just sign it attorney and put an X on all the legal paperwork. Called him up shortly after the election, which is now 8 months ago, and said, hey, they've gone through your computers mathematically, and they say there's about 900 or 2,300, somewhere in that ballpark, votes that are in question. So the guy, you can't walk away from a specific detailed accusation like that. They've gone through your computers mathematically, like not with their fingers or anything. And there's, 900 or possibly, 4 times that many. I don't know. Somewhere in that ballpark, somewhere between what I say and 4 times that many votes are in question. So you got to do something. Now, for what it's worth, even if Barry County's entire population of 62,000 voted illegally for Biden, which it didn't, it wouldn't come close to Biden's 154,000 vote margin in Michigan. But of course they figure, well, if everybody in Barry County voted illegally for Biden, which they didn't, but if they did, it wouldn't take that many more counties to get to 154,000 votes. So all we have to do is find out what other counties had their entire population vote illegally for Biden, and then we got him. What's more, Donald Trump did well in Barry County in 2020, winning 65.4% of the vote, up from 63.4% 4 years earlier. So, all right, fine. Then 35%, or a little bit less, of them illegally voted for Biden. That only makes the work easier. The election also went off without a hitch, despite added pressure from COVID-19 and both presidential campaigns' relentless focus on Michigan's battleground electorate. We found no indicators of fraud whatsoever. My clerks did an exemplary job for that election, said County Clerk Pam Palmer, who collects each township's results every election season and tallies up the county's winners and losers at her office. Palmer, just like County Prosecutor Julie A. Nakfur Pratt, and just like the individual township clerks, was kept in the dark about the sheriff's investigation until she heard about it secondhand when a township clerk called her up in mid-June saying they'd received a voicemail informing them that they would soon be interviewed as part of the probe. As for the Mike Lindell tie-in, Palmer was stumped. I have no idea what Mike Lindell's got to do with any of this other than selling pillows, she told TPM. The involvement of a private investigator, Michael Lynch, former chief security officer at DTE Energy, adds another odd wrinkle to the situation. Lynch did all of the talking, Manel recalled, while the sheriff's deputy accompanying him took notes. Probably didn't want to be there at all. Wilshire remembered the private investigator wearing an, quote, expensive suit. Okay. The deputy, she said, was not wearing a uniform. So that is an odd thing, right? One guy's in an expensive suit and the other guy is completely nude and taking notes. Unless that's not what they mean by not wearing a uniform. Maybe he just came in street clothes. He was an undercover investigator. That's what it is. None of the clerks that TPM spoke to remembered the pair presenting a warrant or a subpoena. Leaf told the Hastings Banner that Lynch came recommended by Stephanie Lambert Gentilla, I don't have any idea how that pronunciation goes, but she is a bit player in the legal effort to steal Trump a second term and one of several attorneys facing sanctions. Remember the sanctions hearing in Michigan for the allegedly frivolous lawsuit she filed seeking to overturn Michigan's election results. Gentilla, or whatever her name is, also represented Sheriff Leaf in a December lawsuit that he filed against Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and the Board of State Canvassers, alleging massive election fraud. A federal judge tossed that suit just a day after it was filed, saying that the sheriff had asked the court to make speculative leaps toward a hazy and nebulous inference that there has been, numerous instances of election fraud and that defendants are destroying the evidence. Gentilla did not respond to TPM's request for comment, but she and Lynch acknowledged Lynch's involvement in the probe to the nonprofit outlet Bridge, Michigan. Gentilla told Bridge, Michael Lynch has not been paid to investigate election fraud in Barry County, but did not explain further. Do we get paid to check into election fraud in a different county and he was there by mistake? Is he there as a volunteer? What's paying for his expensive suit? If that's the case, we don't know. The clerks TPM spoke with emphasized over and over that the election came and went without a hitch. They were confused by the sheriff's probe 8 months after the fact and curious about the cost he would incur for taxpayers. I just want it to be over with, Manel said. I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm sure all the rest of us are too. But we've gotten to the end of it for today, and that's good news. Wow, what a crazy story. And these constitutional sheriffs, I guess there's just no end to them, and we'll be hearing from them for a long time to come. Just no shaking them. All right, one or two more things I want to squeeze in here before we close things out for the weekend and hand it over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A quick hit from the Hill. Christina Marcos writing this piece the other day. Democrat unveils bill to allow only House members to serve as Speaker, aimed obviously at getting rid of the problem of the idea now championed by Matt Gaetz, among others, that they would nominate in a Republican majority House Donald Trump to serve as Speaker of the House and then seek to impeach Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, both and therefore replaced Biden as president with Donald Trump through that line of succession. Well, anyway, that may be a fantasy, but just in case, Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania has introduced a bill that would allow only an elected House member to serve as Speaker. Would that work? Well, I guess presumably in a lawsuit, and certainly when it would go to this Supreme Court, I guess probably not, but it's a good initial barrier, I suppose. And you might as well throw a roadblock up in the way of that. But I guess they could say, well, the Constitution reserves to each House the right to make its own rules. And one of the rules could be that anybody could be Speaker. There's no such rule now. There's just the absence of any prohibition on it. Anyway, so an interesting thing, something to think about over the weekend. Lots more to think about, of course, coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see what I've got by way of preview there. Let's see, because of McCarthy's sideshow, Nancy Pelosi is considering adding more GOP members to the January 6th Commission. I guess just making the selections herself. Sounds like a good thought.
From
There's more, too.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Let's put this one in. The energy giant at the center of a $60 million bribery scheme in Ohio agreed to pay a $230 million bribe so prosecutors won't begin a criminal case against the company. We've got that, plus, of course, some more violent threats now popping up in Pennsylvania demanding a forensic audit.